On this super review, we're gonna take a look at the Moondrop Crescent. All right, so Moondrop is a brand of in-ear monitors that I've been seeing more and more these days. And this, the Crescent, it's their budget-friendly entry-level model. So the Moondrop Crescent is around 30 bucks, and I'm interested in this for a couple of reasons. That's a couple. Reason number one is it looks really cool. The Crescent, well, we're gonna find out when we unbox this thing, but it seems to be made of all brass, so it's got like this nice gold, I guess it's technically brass color. So it looks good. And then the other thing I'm excited about is that it's only about 30 bucks and it seems to be pretty easily available on Amazon. And for me, that's a big deal because a lot of people ask me for recommendations in like the $20 to $30 range. And like the best stuff I have to recommend is like KZ ZSA, which I'm not super excited about, or the KZ ZSN. I think they're good sounding headphones for the price, but I'm just not super excited about recommending those. The one headphone I want to recommend is the Kodongori Brass, but unless you're inside of Japan, if you're outside of Japan, that thing is actually really hard to find for 30 bucks. So will the Moondrop Crescent be my new $30 recommendation? Let's open it up and find out. All right, so we got the Moondrop Crescent sitting here in a box and we can do a quick tour, but I'm afraid we're not gonna learn much. So on the front, we've got Moondrop's pretty handsome logo. On the side, we've got nothing. On that side, absolutely nothing. On the back here, we've got a barcode. We do have a little bit about the specs. So we know that this thing is, let's see, a 32 ohm headphone. They claim, interestingly, they claim 2 different frequency ranges. And there is some verbiage there to explain exactly what they mean, but I am not talented enough to read that, unfortunately. So here we have a number I recognize, 108 decibels. That's gonna be the sensitivity. And down here, that is, I'm guessing, less than 1% THD distortion. D is distortion. So yeah, these are pretty typical claims here for an in-ear monitor. Let's just find out what's inside this box. All right, so we got the Moondrop Crescent completely unboxed here. And this is what you get for 30 bucks. That's not bad, really. All right, let's start over here with the important paperwork. You do get a QR code with, I don't know, it kind of looks like it's a nose in the middle of it. If you want to access that QR code, there you go, there's your chance. What does it mean? I don't know. You do also get an introduction booklet, which is slippery. Wow, it's really slippery. But more importantly, it's very short. Look, that's all you need. Unfortunately, well, at least for me, it all appears to be in Chinese. And again, I don't have the talent to read that, so I'm just not gonna know how to use these headphones. Of course, that's silly. Headphones don't need instructions, but I appreciate them anyway. You do get a hair clip, which is, again, not something I need. My hair is pretty short. But we do get a little carrying pouch. And look, this is not the nicest carrying pouch, but it's also not the worst carrying pouch. And it's very compact. And frankly, I think that's definitely better than nothing. Especially, look, this is a $30 package. Getting some sort of carrying case, that's actually a pretty nice touch. What else is a nice touch is that you get your tips installed on a little paper card like this. And this is just a subtle thing that, frankly, I think this is just a little bit nicer than delivering the tips in a plastic bag. Does it make a difference? No, it doesn't, but I do think it feels nicer. And then talking about feeling nice, you like these transitions today? These ear tips actually feel pretty solid and premium for 30 bucks. These things have got a nice gum to them, a decent grip, and they're also relatively stiff, which, okay, We've got smalls, mediums, and larges, and the difference between the medium and large does not look huge. But pre-installed on the headphone, we do have, looks like, a second pair of the exact same medium ear tips. These actually might be smalls. I do have a pretty stiff bore, which generally means, I don't know actually what that means. I don't think it's gonna take anything off the treble, but it is also a pretty wide bore, so I'm guessing that this tip is gonna play up the treble and maybe even the bass a little bit because of how stiff that core is. And then we get to these buds, which are, these are nice feeling, man. These things are really nice feeling. So they are definitely made out of metal, and they do have a little venting in the back. It's nice. This is just a really sharp looking headphone, and I'm kind of hopeful that because these things are made out of brass, these things, all right, they look really shiny and pretty right now, and they might not look pretty and shiny forever. But just the way that brass tends to wear, these things might actually get more attractive over time, depending on your aesthetic preferences. The only thing that stands out that I'm not a big fan about the design is that the word crescent is sort of carved into the side of one of these buds, but it's not very attractively done. It's like it looks like a really cheap engraving. I don't know, maybe that'll buff out and not look so nasty. No, it doesn't look great. It doesn't seem like it's very straight on there either. I also am not seeing any L or R indicators on these. Now, again, one of the buds has a crescent logo as well. This one bud has a small notch in this part of the bud. But then we get to the cable, and this is a point that I think is gonna be, a hang up for a lot of people. And for me, it's not a hang up, but the cable on this thing is pre-installed and it's not removable, it's not replaceable. Is that a problem for you? I would think about that, right? For me, especially for a $30 headphone, if this cable goes bad, spending 30 bucks to replace it, look, it doesn't make that big a difference for me. What matters more is that, well, okay, this cable is just a little rubbery and it's not the nicest cable, but it's also not the worst pre-installed cable I've seen. But yeah, I think that is gonna be one difference that's gonna separate this from, like $30 KZs. People are still gonna come back and they're gonna say, I want my $30 KZs because they got a replaceable cable. Look, I don't even know if this thing sounds good, but that's what we're gonna find out next. So I'll bring in my Walkman, hook these things up, give them a listening test, run them against my reference library of music, put these things up against some $30 KZs, and I'll come back and I'll let you know, how does the Moondrop Crescent compare to other $30 earbuds? All right, I've been listening to the Moondrop Crescent for a few days now, and for 30 bucks, I think this is a really surprisingly compelling little package. The sound, we'll get into the sound, but let's start with the build quality. So these things are, as you can see, they're pretty small. They're made out of brass, like solid brass, which makes them, I think, really attractive, but also kind of heavy. Not that, I don't think it's a problem for me at all. Like I like the way that these things feel. That weight of that brass just kind of gives it a premium feel to it. And you get that brass, up here at the earbuds. You also get a little brass looking accent down here on the terminal as well as on the Y-split. And just overall, I think it's a really handsome looking headphone. In terms of comfort, look, I like this style of headphone. I've got a number of other headphones like this, including the Final E2000, Kodonguri brass, and I've tried things like the Zero Carbo Tenore. I like this style of earbud. It's small, it fits into your ear well, and you can wear this either hanging down or you can wear it over ear. And personally, I prefer wearing these things over ear. It gives me two benefits. One, I think that wearing these over ear actually makes them a little bit more secure. Actually, I think quite a bit more secure. But the other thing that's really nice about wearing these things over ear is that it reduces microphonics, right? So if you're wearing these things and they're hanging down, you got this cable is hardwired into the back of it. And anytime, you brush up against this cable, especially if it rubs against a zipper or something like that on your shirt, that noise is gonna get transmitted into the earphones. But if you have it wrapped around the back of your ear, basically that connection between the cable and your ear acts as a damper for that microphonics, and it solves that problem for the most part. So that's how I like to wear them, but you can wear them hanging down if you want. If we get into the cable, it's a decent cable. It actually, it's actually straightened out pretty well at this point, and it's a pretty nice cable for a pre-installed cable. It's fairly thick, thicker than what you would get on something like the final E2000s. So that much I like. The only letdown here is that I think a while ago when this headphone first came out, Moondrop was selling it with a much cooler looking cable. And in fact, when I ordered it, the pictures had that cool looking cable, and the seller emailed me like, is it okay if we send it to you with a different cable? And I reluctantly agreed, but I think this is the cable that you're gonna get going on from now. And again, it's a fine cable. If I had only one serious complaint, I do wish it had a chin cinch. And generally I don't wear chin cinches with most earphones, but when I'm wearing an earphone like this over ear and there are no preformed hooks, having that chin cinch helps with the security, and you don't get it here. Small bummer. So now we can talk about the sound quality, which is where I think the Moondrop Crescent really excels. Look, I love the way this thing is built, but I love even more the sound of it. So the general sound signature of this, I would describe as very consumer friendly, which is to say, I don't know, some audiophile headphones, like they'll experiment with different sound signatures, and you'll get something that sounds really warm, something that sounds really bright. But then if you go and listen to like an off-the-shelf Sony headphone, it's gonna sound like a headphone. Like, it's not gonna sound warm or bright, and it's not neutral. It's just what I would call consumer. And that is, I think, the sound signature of the Moondrop Crescent. Now here, we've got that consumer-friendly sound signature done really, really, really well. So these things actually have really strong bass. In fact, like the bass impact is surprisingly good. It's not like that the bass is so elevated that it becomes overwhelming at all. Like, it's very nicely done, very tastefully done. But I think maybe it's the sub bass impact from this dynamic driver. It just makes the bass feel bigger than it sounds, if that makes any sense, right? So the bass is, again, it's not overpowering the rest of the frequency range, but you still feel it as if it were. It's pretty well done. I do think this consumer-friendly sound signature is a bit of a V. With the mids are not, I wouldn't say, I mean, they're a little pulled back compared to the treble and the bass, but they're not gone. But they are definitely not the emphasis. It's the bass and then the treble, which is, it's again, very tastefully done in these things, where there's good treble detail, and there's enough treble energy there that these things are pretty exciting to listen to, but not so much that I don't think this is gonna be a problem for anybody. If you're treble sensitive, I think this thing will be perfectly comfortable. I didn't detect any sibilance with this thing. Just overall a very, very well-tuned, consumer-friendly sound. Of all the headphones that I've got, the ones that I think sound the most similar to this are actually the Sony MH755, which, if you've never heard of it, that's just a bunch of letters and numbers, and it probably doesn't mean anything to you. If you have heard of it, well, you know that it's a very well-regarded headphone for being such a cheap dynamic driver headphone. This sound signature is, I think, similar to the Sony's, but I would say that the bass on the Sony's is more elevated. I actually like the bass quite a bit more here, but it is more elevated on the Sony's. And then the treble here has got a little bit more juice than it does on the Sony's. The Sony's treble is very relaxed and comfortable. This has just got a little bit more to it that, for me, again, I'm kind of a treble head. I think it just makes it more exciting to listen to. One other thing about the sound that's worth calling out with the Crescent, and this is maybe the biggest caveat that I can give with this headphone, is that it's actually fairly hard to drive. I mean, it's not like Sennheiser HD series hard to drive, but I am having to use a higher volume on my Walkman than I typically use, right? So on, let's say, the average IEM, on my Walkman, I'll have it at a volume of around like 75. With these, I'm going up to 95. And that's not the best way to describe it, but I hope that kind of gives you an idea of these things being harder to drive. Now, the max volume on my Walkman is 120, so I'm not like maxing it out to get these things at a good volume. But that is just something to consider. If you're playing these things off of a source that's not particularly powerful, you might have to be bumping up against the top of your volume limiter in order to get these things to sound their best. So if I were to rate the Moondrop Crescent out of 5 stars, I'd give these things solid 5 stars out of 5. Look, these things, again, are 30 bucks. And for 30 bucks, you get a really nicely tuned sound and a pretty nicely built package. Look, these brass buds, I would love these on an even more expensive headphone. The fact that they come on this little $30 headphone is pretty impressive. You know, the only downside is that you're stuck with this cable, which is, again, it's not the worst cable, but I wouldn't mind putting a really, really nice cable on these things. If you're interested in checking out the Moondrop Crescent, of course, I've got links in the description down below. While you're down there, you can hit the like button for the video if you liked it. You can subscribe to the channel, and then I'll see you in the next super review.